In this video, we will introduce you to the discrete trial, which is fundamental to understanding how to teach various structured programs. Discrete trials provide three important benefits when used in teaching. Discrete trials make it very clear as to what you are trying to teach by using distinct instructions and letting the child know precisely when they are right or wrong. Discrete trials help multiple teachers maintain consistency and quality across weeks and months. Discrete trials make data collection and the ability to measure progress clear, easy, and objective. There are 5 key components to the discrete trial: the motivation, the instruction, the help, the response, and the reward. In behavioral terminology, we write these as MO, or motivating operation, SD, or discriminative stimulus, SP, or prompt stimulus, R, or response, and SR, or reinforcing stimulus. Notice how the capital letter S stands for stimulus, and the superscript describes what type of stimulus you're referring to. We can rewrite this in the form of an equation or formula. Looks daunting, doesn't it? It's not, and by the end of this lecture you'll have a good grasp of what it means. In plain terms, though, we can read this as motivation with an instruction, with or without help, leads to a response, which we then reward. In behavioral terms, we say the motivation occurs with the SD, and with or without prompts, acts upon the response, and the response is acted upon by the reward. Let's go through an example of this in practice so you have a general idea about what each step is that we're talking about. Here, we place a reward on the table. This strengthens the establishing operation, or motivation, assuming that the child is hungry. We present our instruction, or SD, touch ball, and we simultaneously prompt by pointing to the correct card. Next, the child responds correctly by touching the correct card. Finally, we give verbal praise, excellent, and an M&M as a reward. Let's summarize what we just did. The EO, or establishing operation, was hunger. We cued this by showing the child the bag of M&Ms before starting the trial. The SD, or instruction, was touch ball. The SP, or prompt, was pointing. The R, or response, was the child touched the correct card, and the reward was candy. Now let's talk a little bit about each of these components. The MO. This is the motivating operation. It's the variable that describes the motivation or need for reinforcement. The first type of MO is the EO, or establishing operation. It is the variable that increases the value of the reward and increases the frequency of the behavior. It is manipulated by periods of deprivation and satiation. For example, if you are hungry, then you have a high EO for foods that are rewarding. The second type of MO is the AO, or abolishing operation. It's the variable that decreases the value of the reward and also decreases the frequency of a behavior. Food can also be an abolishing operation. Once you've had enough food, then you abolish the effectiveness of food as a reinforcer and therefore decrease the likelihood of a response. It's important to understand that motivating operations are dynamic. They constantly change and again are manipulated by periods of deprivation and satiation, that is, not getting it and getting a lot of it. For example, if we don't eat a period of deprivation, this creates hunger, which then increases the motivation and desire for food and causes you to go find something to eat. Eating a period of satiation satisfies your hunger. This abolishes the motivation for food and causes you to stop food-seeking behavior. Proper motivation, then, is the key to learning. You must have an EO for the reward you are trying to use. So if you are trying to use food, you need to be sure that your child is hungry. You can create an EO by using visual presentations of reinforcers. Advertisers do this all the time. They show you what's available, and suddenly you have a need for something you didn't even know you needed. Be careful that you are not using an abolishing operation when you should be using an establishing operation. Perhaps you know your child likes salty snacks, and you know for a fact that he's hungry. You decide to try popcorn, but it turns out he doesn't like popcorn, and instead of increasing the desired behavior, you have decreased it. SD, the discriminative stimulus. It's the cue, instruction, or question that signals reinforcement is available with a correct response. Let's cover some guidelines for SDs. Spoken SDs should be clearer, simpler, and louder than everyday speech. They should initially have a higher pitch and hyperarticulation. Later, the SDs can be faded to more natural language. Take, for example, do this versus do this. You should also remove extra noise by making SDs concise, speaking only the most important words. For example, you would say, touch ball, not, Michael, can you please touch the ball? You should also say the whole SD without interruption. Touch ball, not touch ball. You will want to use the exact same wording every trial. For example, use, what's your name? Not, what is your name, what's your name, who are you, tell me your name. You'll also want to use consistent format when presenting materials. Let's say you're trying to teach waving. A common inconsistency is that people may wave differently. One might just move their wrist up and down, another side to side, and another may rotate their wrist altogether. Also, don't repeat the SD. The instruction is spoken only once before a consequence, so don't say, do this, do this, do this, do this, without consequencing the child's response. Don't worry, these guidelines will become second nature as you go along. We'll provide you with some recommended SDs for each program. This will make the process easier and take out some of the guesswork of finding the ideal SDs. SP, or prompt stimulus. It's a stimulus that helps the child achieve the correct response. It must be faded over time. Some common types of prompts include hand over hand, physical guidance, gestures like pointing, physically modeling the response, positioning the item closer to the child, verbally modeling the response for the child, emphasizing through the use of inflection some important aspect of the SD like stand up, and phonemic prompts. You will want to use the least intrusive prompt possible while still achieving a success. For example, it's preferred to use pointing towards the correct item rather than physically guiding the child's hand to it. Care must be taken to fade prompts to facilitate independence. You'll also want to avoid inadvertent prompts, such as glancing at the correct item or mouthing the correct answer while the child is waiting to respond. The prompt should occur at the same time as the SD, or as soon as possible after it, generally within about 3 seconds. In order to keep the drill successful, if the skill is new, prompt every trial. Otherwise, prompt after no more than 2 incorrect responses. You can discover more about prompting and fading prompts in our video library. R, or response. This is the child's action in response to the SD, the answer. A non-response is considered the same as an incorrect response. You will want to use consistent criteria to determine what is considered correct. Suppose we are teaching clap. One person may want the child to touch their hands together, another to make a clapping sound, and the other person may expect 3 to 4 claps before they reinforce. You need to make sure that all of the responses are the same. Be certain extraneous behavior is absent, like self-stimulatory behavior or multiple responses. The reward really doesn't know the difference between what you want and the extra behavior. It is all reinforced equally. You'll want to limit the time between the SD and the response to about 3 to 5 seconds. Ideally, you want quick, accurate responses. We'll also be providing you with the expected response for each program along the way, and some tips for which responses to accept and what to do to shape up the less than ideal responses. SR, or reinforcing stimulus. This is the consequence following the child's response that changes the likelihood with which the behavior will reoccur. In general, rewards will increase the behavior, and a lack of reward will decrease the behavior. We'll talk more about SRs in another video. For now, just think that you'll be using either rewards or the absence of rewards as your SR. You'll want to deliver reinforcers immediately following a response. You'll also want to use a reward for a correct response and an informational try again for an incorrect response. You'll want to differentiate your reinforcers. Try not to say try again in the same tone of voice as good. Try also not to smile when you're delivering your try again. Be sure to vary your rewards. Typical rewards are food, toys, privileges, praise, affection, attention, tickling, acting silly, physical movement, and preferred activities. Remember, you always want to offer social praise and try to make it circus time. Don't just repeat good job, good job, good job with the same inflection after every correct response. You need to individually select each reinforcer for each child. You have to previously determine this in a separate session, not while you're trying to teach a new skill. Also, be sure to make rewards contingent upon correct responses. Don't have them available through any other means or at any other times. Remember, large amounts of reinforcement produce stronger effects, but you want to avoid satiation by using smaller amounts and a variety of rewards. You can check out more in our video library for information on reinforcement and creative ways to praise and reward your child. Okay, a few last things before we put it all together. So far we've talked about a single discrete trial. A collection of simultaneously presented discrete trials is called a drill. There is a pause between each discrete trial called the intertrial interval. The intertrial interval should be long enough so that each trial is discrete, but not so long that the child loses focus or begins to engage in other behaviors. This is generally about 1 to 3 seconds. Also recall that we mentioned that you shouldn't let a child fail more than twice with items the child has already had some exposure to. This is called the try again, prompt retrial rule. This sequence occurs a lot, so you'll need to practice it so that you can become comfortable with it. Alright, let's work through the example we used in the beginning to solidify the concepts. We started by presenting the reward, thereby increasing the EO. Next, we clearly presented the SD, touch ball, with a prompt of pointing. Next, the child responded correctly. Finally, we rewarded with an M&M and the verbal praise, excellent. Okay, now let's practice karaoke style. I want you to read along as each word changes color. Try to develop the proper rhythm, pace, and intonation. If the word appears in white, like the word shuffle, you don't need to read that. Those are simply inserted to help with timing. The first guided practice is a mass trial of ball in the Receptive Labels program. Ready, set, show the reward, and go. Touch ball. Excellent. Touch ball. Wonderful. Touch ball. You're so smart. Touch ball. Wow. Touch ball. That was great. Go play. Okay, our second guided practice is a random rotation in the Receptive Labels program. Ready, set, show the reward, and go. Touch ball. Bravo! Touch crayon. Superb! Touch Coke. Dynamite. Touch ball. Super work. Touch crayon. Marvelous. Go play. Our third guided practice is a random rotation in the Receptive Labels program. We will focus in on the try again, prompt retrial sequence. Ready, set, show the reward, and go. Touch ball. Right on. Touch crayon. Try again. Touch crayon. Try again. Touch crayon. That's it. Touch crayon. You got it. Go play. Great job. Okay, if you didn't quite get it, go back and practice until it feels comfortable. Okay, let's summarize. The discrete trial is made up of 5 key components: the MO, the SD, the prompt, the response, and the SR. Be sure you have proper motivation for the reward you are going to use before you start. The SD should be clear and concise with unique tone. You should prompt every trial when beginning to teach something new, and follow the try again, prompt retrial rule for all other items. Use the least intrusive prompt that's possible while still helping your child achieve the correct response. Whatever the child does after the SD or after the prompt is their response. This includes not responding in the 5 seconds, so be sure to consequate correctly. Finally, the reward strengthens the response and needs to be something that is currently desirable for the child. It may take some practice to get good. If you're unsure, do the guided practice again or find a partner to practice with. I'm James Milan for AutismGurus.com, helping your child become a star.